Good Saturday morning, everyone. Today on Perspectives, if you've heard the words Semper Fi, or to be correct, Semper Fidelis, you probably know that it's the motto of the United States Marine Corps. But you may not have known, though, that some Americans during World War II had to fight to become a member of one of the elite military forces in the world. The history of the Montford Point Marines is not as well known a story as it should be. They are the first African Americans to enlist in the U.S. Marine Corps after President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued an executive order establishing the Fair Employment Practices Commission in 1941. The recruits eventually trained at Camp Montford Point in North Carolina near Camp Lejeune. They actually had first, though, build their quarters and other military facilities at the camp. Now, they were trained beginning in 1942 until the camp's decommissioning 7 years later. The largest number of black Marines to serve in combat in World War II took part in the seizure of Okinawa, with approximately 2,000 troops seeing action. Their legacy lives on with the formation of the National Montford Point Marines Association, which now has its headquarters in Mobile, as well as chapters throughout the United States. Joining us this morning are National President Dr. James Everhart, a retired Chief Warrant Officer in the Marine Corps, and retired Master Gunnery Sergeant Cynthia House, the National General Director of the National Montford Point Marines Association. Well, more on the fascinating history and progress of the Montford Point Marines Association when Perspectives continues. This morning on Perspectives, our very special guest, retired Chief Warrant Officer 5, Dr. James C. Everhart, and retired Master Gunnery Sergeant Cynthia House. We thank you both for joining us here this morning on Perspectives.
Good morning. Thank you.
We're going to start with the date August 26th. That is Montford Point Marine Day. Why is this day important?
Well, this day is very important to the sense August 26, 1942 is the first day that the day that the first African American would report to the segregated training base, Camp Montford Point, Jacksonville, North Carolina. That Marine was Howard P. Perry from Charlotte, North Carolina.
So we're talking about the beginnings of African American men and women serving in the Marine Corps. And the story, you know, for most folk, they probably have no idea what those initial Montford Point Marines went through. And I really think it's important that you all have a national organization that's remembering the struggle as well as all of the energy and effort that they put forth to make sure that everyone had an opportunity to serve in the Marine Corps. How was it for that first group? I understand that in 1941 they were given the opportunity to serve, but it took a whole year for the door to open.
That's correct. So this was only due to Executive Order 8802 signed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt to allow African Americans to serve in the military, period. So Eric, I want to just a point of clarification as it pertains to Montford Point. The Montford Point camp, only 20,000 African American men only served at the segregated training base at that time. So during the periods of 1942 to 1949, 20,000 African American men only. However, with the history of Montford Point, these men were true trailblazers, pioneers who paved the way for thousands of others to follow, include Marines from all ethnicities and nationalities.
Now, when you talk about that, those first recruits, 900 of them, they didn't go there just to train. They had to really, literally build the facility.
That's correct. They reported to the segregated base, which was just woods and during that time frame, it was a real rural area. So these men had to build their base. The first group of 900, as you spoke of, had to build their training facility.
Now, from my understanding, and Master Gunnery Sergeant House, you might want to chime in on this one. I was really blown away to understand that just not too many months or a year or so earlier, $14 million were spent to build Camp Lejeune, where the rest of the Marines were training.
Exactly, and the interesting thing is that none of those monies were actually allocated to do anything with the Montford Point camp.
Right.
So as we look at the association, how did this come about? When did the first Marines decide that we're going to make sure that these First Marines were always remembered, and what they did and accomplished would be something that would live in perpetuity. So tell us, how did the association come about?
Actually, you know what? It's kind of like everybody else does. You know, they wanted a reunion. So back in 1965, they put out the words to, hey, let's get together, if you will, thinking that a handful of them would show up in Philadelphia. 400 right. showed up for this little mini reunion.
Right.
And from that point forward, they chartered and they started the Montford Point Marine Association. So Philadelphia is our home base for that. We don't like to tell them that because we always think that Mobile, Alabama is the best, but right. Chapter 1 is actually the first chapter of the Montford Point Marine Association.
That is an awesome beginning. And
yes.
We're going to talk more about where Mobile now is the national headquarters, and we have the distinction of having the president and Dr. Averhart here with us, and as well as the director of the national publication, Master Gunnery Sergeant House, here is with us as well this morning. So Mobile is definitely on the map as relates to the association. Now, how many of the 20,000 are still alive today?
I'll venture to say there's about 400 that's still alive today. However, Eric, what we're doing is we have a national all call to try to find these Montford Point Marines. Since the Congressional Gold Medal awarding in 2012, what we've actually had the opportunity to do was award well over 2,000 Congressional Gold Medals. However, we're on the active search to find World War II African-American men Marines who trained during that period of time, and most likely they are a Montford Point Marine, those individuals who served at the segregated base.
Well, when you look at the stories that they have passed down over the years, one of the ones that really stood out for me was that the first officer who was denied 1 year, and then the second year after those saw his work and the quality of his character, they decided to give him an opportunity to go to OCS. Right. And we're talking this morning about Frederick C. Branch, I believe.
Right, that's correct.
And he, it really hurt my heart to understand that he was not given something as all of the Marine officers were given when they were commissioned, but years later you all made sure that it did happen. Tell us what more of that story.
You want to go, Cynthia? Well, Frederick Branch, is the first African-American Marine officer. But what's unique about his story, Eric, is that the day he became a first lieutenant, they retired him from active duty and sent him to the reserve during that time frame as well. This was all because African-Americans could not be in charge of their white counterparts.
Right. You go back and you make me think about this other story I heard about the Commandant of the Marine Corps in 1941.
Right.
In fact, he said it in 1942 that if it was a question of having 250,000 blacks, he called them Negro soldiers, compared to 5,000 whites, he'd still rather have just the 5,000 whites. So there was a lot of struggle and fight there just to become a Marine back in the early 40s. And this is while the war is going on in both the European and the Asian theater.
That's correct. That's correct. That Major General Thomas Holcomb made that comment. You have to understand the story of Montford Point is a story of resilience, a story of perseverance, for one. Their whole likelihood at that time frame was simply an experiment. Many don't know that the Marine Corps, the United States Marine Corps, is the last branch of service to accept African Americans within the ranks.
Yes.
And this was only due to Executive Order 8802.
And I guess a couple of names where we were talking about the different people who really made a difference in the Marine Corps and setting the example. One of the stories that I heard also was the fact that they were relieved when they finally got the black first sergeants and the training sergeants, the drill sergeants, but they were not easier on the men. In fact, they were going to make sure they were a Marine plus.
That's correct. That is correct. When the camp first opened up, as I stated, they had Southern gentlemen, Southern white officers who were mostly in charge as the officers in charge and as the drill instructors. And this was due to the fact that the Marine Corps at the time figured that the Southern white gentlemen had more experience with African Americans and knew how to handle the Negro. So that's why they was in charge. And as time progressed, and within about 7 months, 8 months, when the second group of Montford Point of Marines, they made them drill instructors. However, those African American drill instructors, they were harder on the African American recruits because they know failure was not an option.
That's right.
That they had to withstand the rigor of training, the adversity and despondence that was taking place during that time frame. So they were very hard on the African American recruits, even harder than the white drill instructors were.
And if I might chime in on that.
And Master Gunnery Sergeant House, we're going to take a break on that point right there. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about the National Montford Point Marine Association, as well as our distinguished guests this morning, two of our national officers. And in fact, because of that, the new headquarters for the next, I guess we'll talk about term, are here in Mobile, Alabama. Perspectives continues in just a moment. This morning we're talking here on Perspectives about the Montford Point Marine Association. Two very special guests this morning, retired Chief Warrant Officer 5, that's Dr. James T. Averhart Jr., as well as retired Master Gunnery Sergeant Cynthia House, both Alabamians now, and also another special Alabamian that we want to make sure that you mention this morning and tell us more about is the Sergeant Major, retired of course, Gilbert Hashmark Johnson, and I understand that he's from Alabama, as well as something is now named after him.
Actually, I would be remiss if I would not mention Sergeant Major Huff. But yes, Camp Montford Point in 1974 was renamed for Camp for Sergeant Major Johnson, and it's such a big deal for us primarily because I'm always looking for a way to throw that Alabama connection in, and they were both from Alabama. One from Mount Hebron, and
Mount Hebron.
Mount Hebron, right.
And Gaskin.
And Gaskin.
Right.
Yes. So a proud legacy, and Alabama has always stood proud in serving the country, and still to this day, of course. So the camp now, Montford Point, is named Camp Johnson, and Alabama has that connection still, and of course a Montford Point Marine has that distinction as well.
Exactly.
Now tell us, the national organization decided to elect Dr. Averhart once again. This is not your first time, but your second time in office as the national president.
That's correct.
What led you to decide to do this again? Is this a very important time?
Well, yes, Eric. First of all, yes, it's a very important time. However, I did not run for national president this term. I had no intention on running. I was just a past national president and doing my duties to assist the organization to continue to grow. I was served as the national president from 2009 to 2015 while on active duty as a volunteer. And a lot of things happened during that time frame. Those 6 years, there was 3 consecutive terms. Each term is 2 years. So I had 3 consecutive terms, and then I stepped away. And here shortly, July the 17th, the association felt need to want to bring me back to continue to move forward with our current platform. But Eric, let me step back for a moment just to add to what Master Gunnery Sergeant House mentioned earlier in regards to Camp Gilbert H. Johnson. This is the first and only Marine Corps base to date named after an African American Marine, which is, during 2021, it's still historic in that nature.
Yes. My goodness. And you think about all the installations, and I grew up, in fact, my grandfather worked at the Albany depot there in Albany, Georgia. I used to, as a child, spend a lot of time on the base for the family activities, and they had the only drive-in movie theater that we were allowed to go to at that time as well on the Marine Corps base. So special place in my heart for that. Tell us what some of the things that were accomplished in that first term, those first 3 terms, and what you expect to do now here in the year 2021.
Well, that's a great question, Eric. So during my tenure as the national president from 2009 to 2015. One of the, and I did none of that by myself. We just had a great staff, a great group of service members, mostly Marines, who worked on the project. And the first initiative was to get the Congressional Gold Medal. So the Congressional Gold Medal was awarded and signed off by President Obama in 2012.
Yes.
Our next initiative were to get a ship named after the Montford Point Marines, and that was USNS MLP-1 Montford Point. And then during that time frame somewhere, the date kind of escapes me at this time, but we did the groundbreaking for a national monument, and I used to call this the crown jewel of the East Coast. We built a $1.8 million monument on the hollow grounds of Camp Montford Point, now Gibbert Johnson, Camp Johnson at Camp Lejeune. We built a $1.8 million monument. So I was very proud of that initiative, because again, it was an association comprised of, at that time, 42 chapters, and we worked together, and that is our motto: working together, work. And we actually sponsored that bill. Also sponsored that monument and raised the majority of the funding for that monument. Of course, we had partners and such,
yes,
but we were able to actually turn that monument over to the Secretary of the Navy ahead of schedule, about 5 years ahead of schedule.
That is awesome to speak of that, and congratulations to the association.
Right.
Now, Master Gunnery Sergeant House is also your association's National Journal Director.
That's correct.
And give us an idea of why you wanted to do that.
Well, what I did, Eric, from my tenure, I wanted to point her. I saw she was a go-getter. The first time I saw her at a convention, it's always, there's a lot of work to be done, but we needed someone that didn't mind working. So as a national president during my first tenure, I appointed Cynthia to be the journal director, and she's been off to the races ever since then.
Tell us how much you enjoy that.
I thoroughly enjoy it because I've got a partner in crime, Master Gunnery Sergeant Gilbert Taylor, and it's just two of us, and a lot of people don't realize that, but he does the magic and I take the credit.
Okay.
We'll leave it at that.
Okay. Now, I want to mention one of the struggles, of course, for the African-American men to become Marines, but it's been a struggle for the women, both black and white, and other groups in the Marine Corps to get all of their proper places and opportunities. And Master Gunnery Sergeant House, you are a E9 retired, and for folks that don't know what that means, what does that mean?
That's the top of the line.
Thank you.
On the enlisted side.
That's right, that's right.
And I chose to stay that way because I felt the need to lead and train juniors. I felt like I would be in a better position to do that, standing in the enlisted ranks, and so far it's worked.
And you, of course, are very busy not only with the association, but with other veterans groups here in the local community. In fact, I met you at one of those events. But you have also been recognized as the Veteran of the Year for 2021, not female or Marine Corps woman, but the Veteran of the Year.
That's right. Awesome job.
That is such an honor. I don't know who told you, but it absolutely is. And especially being a female. I came in during the Vietnam era, and we don't need to talk about that, but let's just say not only has the Marine Corps changed, but the military has changed itself for the better, and I'm proud of those women to do that, and I'm proud for an opportunity to represent.
So, as we look ahead for what we expect to hear from the association here in Mobile in the next couple of years, tell me what do we expect to see?
Well, we're going to be following the lead of the national president. There are a number of things that we do anyway. Chapter 33 participates in a number of veterans events. The Veterans Day Parade, of course, everybody does that. We participate in the Memorial Day program, Armed Forces Day program. So there are things that we do with other veterans. For ourselves, there are things within the chapter that we've continued to do. We've offered scholarships. We've been doing that for a number of years now. But our primary focus in trying to continue that legacy of the original Montford Point Marines, any community involvement, we tend to look at the youth, and that's what we've been trying to do. In fact, we've got a bit of a partnership going on. We're not able to get it off the ground because of COVID, but we've been working with Strickland Youth Center as well as the Boys and Girls Club. And
On
we
that,
hope
I'm
to
going
be
to have to
moving
jump
forward.
in here, but I am so appreciative of both of you joining us today and sharing this about the incredible organization of the National Montford Point Marine Association. And we look forward to hearing more from you, and we will have you back again to tell us more about those great things that are happening, since we are now the national headquarters in Mobile, Alabama. Once again, Dr. James Aberhard and Master Gunnery Sergeant Cynthia House, we thank you so much for coming and sharing this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you'd like to know more about the National Montford Point Marine Association, you can email them at info@montfordpointmarines.org, or you can also write them at the address you see there on your screen, or please visit their website. Next up on Perspectives, sadly reported too frequently, another homicide in Mobile County. We appear to be on a course for a record year, but it's not just an unfortunate dilemma for our area. Nationally, according to a recently released FBI report, homicide numbers were up in 2020 from the year before. Mayor Sandy Simpson campaigned to make Mobile the safest city in the U.S. So what's being done to curtail the gun violence and homicides? We talked to the Port City's Public Safety Director and the newly appointed police chief. Well, please join us here next Saturday morning for Perspectives as we discuss those important issues and seek solutions. I'm Eric Reynolds. Have a great week ahead, and thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for watching Fox 10 News. Watch us live wherever you are, on our mobile, our streaming news app, and you can also watch us on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV.